Today's case is a difficult one. I'm talking about Becky Watts, a 16-year-old girl who was taken from the world by her own stepbrother in a sexually motivated attack. Becky had two older siblings. She and her biological brother, Daniel, were 2 years apart. Becky also had a stepbrother, Nathan Matthews. Becky and Nathan were much further apart in age, 10 years to be exact, and he visited the family house occasionally but did not live with them. Well, Nathan did not take to liking Becky very much. She was so much younger than him. They had nothing to do together, and he found her to be annoying. Sadly, when Becky was only 12 years old, she was diagnosed with anorexia. Becky had lost a lot of weight in a short amount of time and wouldn't touch her food at meals. To make matters worse, her stepbrother Nathan would criticize her at home. Even though Becky had almost been hospitalized because of her eating disorder, Nathan ridiculed her, telling her that she needed to lose more weight. When Becky was 15 years old, her stepmother Angie was diagnosed with MS, also known as multiple sclerosis. She loved her stepmother. The last time Angie saw Becky was on Tuesday, February 19th, 2015. Angie had left the house around 11:15 a.m. for a doctor's appointment regarding her MS treatment. Becky had gone to hang out with a friend on Wednesday, February 20th, 2015, and slept over at their house. But on Thursday the 21st, Becky didn't post anything on social media or reply to her friends' messages. Angie noticed that she still wasn't home yet, but assumed that Becky was staying over at her friend's again. However, when Friday the 22nd rolled around and Becky still had not returned home, Becky's friends were scared. She hadn't responded to any of their messages in days or posted anything. They decided to head to her house and see if she was there. When they arrived, Angie went into panic mode. She had assumed Becky was with her friends, but now that her friends were standing on her doorstep asking the same question, alarm bells started to go off. No one in Becky's family had seen or heard from her since that Tuesday. All of Becky's electronics, her phone, laptop, and tablet computer were gone, but her clothes, makeup, money, and everything else that a typical teenage girl has were left behind, untouched in her bedroom. After they checked the room and called around to other family members, Darren called the police to report her missing around 4 p.m. At that point, no one had seen or heard from Becky in almost 2 days. After a couple of hours, the police finally showed up at the house and began questioning the family and friends who were there. That's when Nathan's girlfriend, Shauna, said that she believed Becky was in the house on that Thursday. She never saw her, but heard movement in the house while she was there and assumed it was Becky grabbing something and slamming the door as she left. On February 22nd, the Avon and Somerset police started asking around for information on Becky's whereabouts. The very next day, Darren and Becky's grandmother held a press conference hoping to get the word out. Police, as well as volunteers, started looking in nearby neighborhoods, parks, and nature reserves. There were no leads, so they were looking everywhere they could. The authorities checked back in with Becky's friends and family. They wanted to make sure everyone's story added up. That's when they met back up with Shauna and Nathan, the last people to have seen, or I guess heard, Becky on Thursday. The glaring issue was Shauna and Nathan did not seem eager to talk to the police in the slightest. Nathan talked about how much he didn't care for Becky in his interviews. He claimed that Becky was rude to his mother. Shauna and Nathan's stories matched up just a little bit too perfectly, which caused authorities to be suspicious, almost like they had planned what they were going to say. After this, the police did a forensic scan of Becky's house. The authorities discovered red stains and fingerprints from 3 different heights in Becky's doorway. On February 28th, both Nathan and Shauna were arrested at their home in connection to Becky's disappearance, and on March 2nd, they were rearrested on suspicion of murder. While the two of them were in custody, investigators got to work searching their home. When they got inside, the team could barely move around. Inside was a hoarding situation. It was covered floor to ceiling in boxes and random junk, and it was difficult to navigate. The police then went upstairs to search and finally made it into the upstairs bathroom. They find the bathtub and shower sparkling, shiny, and completely untouched. The one thing in the entire house that wasn't dirty. If that wasn't suspicious enough, the police found receipts from a hardware store dated the exact day that Becky went missing. Listed on the receipt were a circular saw, gloves, goggles, and face masks. On March 3rd, sadly, Becky's body was found dismembered in bags and boxes. On March 4th, Nathan was charged with murder. A funeral was held for Becky on April 17, 2015, at St. Ambrose Church in Whitehall, Bristol. She was just 16 years old. The prosecutors believed that Becky had been suffocated by Nathan during a sexually motivated kidnapping plan, in which Shauna was involved as well. After Becky was gone, the couple took her body and stored it in the trunk of their car and went back into the family home as if nothing had happened. Hours later, the two of them drove back to their home where they spent multiple days dismembering Becky's body by knife and saw, which were purchased at the hardware store, stashing the remains inside bags and boxes and hiding them in a neighbor's shed. DNA was found connecting both Nathan and Shauna to the items inside the shed. CCTV footage was found of Nathan and Shauna on February 19th going into a store to purchase batteries, which they used in stun guns during the attack. The day after Becky died, you can see Nathan purchasing a saw and other supplies. Just days after that, there's footage of both of them purchasing cleaning products to use for the bathroom where they carried out the dismemberment. Nathan admitted that he did kill Becky, but it was merely an accident. He had intended on just kidnapping her as punishment for her rude behavior, and in the heat of the moment, he took her life. He claimed Shauna was innocent and was in the garden while the actual dismemberment took place. Text messages between the two were brought up in court as well, talking about their desire to kidnap schoolgirls months before Becky's death. The judge believed that Nathan had an unnatural obsession with underage girls and wanted to live out a fantasy of taking advantage of them. Shauna was persuaded to participate. After 3.5 hours of deliberation on November 11, 2015, Nathan Matthews was found guilty of murder and Shauna Hoare was found guilty of manslaughter. They were convicted of conspiracy to kidnap, perverting the course of justice, and preventing the lawful burial of a body. To make things even worse, 4 other people stood trial for their involvement as well. James Ireland, Donovan Demetrius, Carl Demetrius, and Jadine Parsons were charged with assisting an offender by moving Becky's body out of the shed. In February of the following year, a bench was unveiled in Becky's honor at a park near Becky's home, hand-carved by Andy O'Neill. A mural was also painted in memory of her. The following March, Darren, Becky's father, released a memoir about her life, death, and trial proceedings. I cannot imagine how difficult it must have been to be in that courtroom and hear the horrific details. Later in 2016, both Nathan and Shauna filed appeals, but were rejected. The court had no reason to believe their sentencing was unfair. Nathan received a life sentence with a minimum of 33 years. Shauna was given 17 years in prison. And that, my friends, is the horrific story of Becky Watts' death at the hands of her own stepbrother. This story was particularly difficult to research as there was so much life for Becky to live. I hope that her family and friends are healing. What are your thoughts on this case? Is this one you've heard before? Because I sure haven't. Until next time, I'm your host, Brandi. Stay safe.